Okay, let's talk about positive negative space, and this is part of our shape module. So, what is positive negative space? Essentially, positive space is the main focus of an image or the subject of an image. And here you can see it's the picture. That's the positive space. The negative space is therefore any background or areas around the object that aren't activated. So all this empty space here, this is all the negative space. And when you use creatively and intelligently, it's really nice to have positive negative space together that can be visually compelling. It can really make your composition dynamic and balanced when you think about what should be positive and what should be negative. So a couple of examples. The Zentangle you just did, many of you did Zentangles where you worked within the page and you have blank space that is not activated, and then you had a lot of activated space that was your positive space. So one of the directives was to not have too much empty page. That's because a lot of negative space kind of sometimes can really ruin a composition. So specifically, look at this composition. This is kind of balanced. We have negative space, we have positive space, and that can work really well when the two are pretty balanced. You can also have kind of zoom in where you have more positive space than negative space. Here the tree takes up more space than the empty white around it. That can still look really good. And now, when you zoom out, you can still have a pleasant impact on a composition when you have a lot of negative space, but I wouldn't advise it so early on in your art career because having a lot of empty space usually means that there's not enough happening in a composition, especially for younger artists. So it can work. There's no guarantee rule, but it is something I would say at this point try to avoid. So positive negative does not mean good or bad in this context. And there's, again, no correct amount of space to have for a balanced composition. And it's also fun to think about how you can play around with positive negative shapes, or positive negative space. So these two examples of posters, you can see the apple here is the positive space. It's the color, it's the focus. But then the negative space that's cut out, like the bites, so Snow White and the Witch, which is really great. And here, the negative space in between the prongs of the fork are wine bottles because it's a food and wine festival, another really creative design happening. And then this one, you can see this is the initial photo here on the right. This is the poster. You kind of see, I don't know Batman enough to know which villain this is, but this is the villain silhouette. And you can see the negative space here is Batman silhouette. So if you flip it upside down, you can see the Batman. That was in the black, and the villain that was in the yellow. So some really fun ways to play around with negative and positive space on a composition. Now, negative and positive shapes are slightly different. A positive shape is whatever the subject is. So see the shape of this vase? The shape of this vase is the positive shape in your composition. And then the shape around it is the negative shape. And see this little space inside the handle? That's another negative shape happening right in there. Now the reason I want to introduce positive and negative shapes is because it can really help when you start to draw from observation to get an accurate read on what you're looking at. A lot of times when we draw, we just start drawing what we see, and that's the positive shapes. So you draw for this little mannequin. You draw the head, you draw the neck, and the little torso, and the arms, and the shoulder. But sometimes it's helpful for your brain to actually, instead of looking at the positive shapes, look at that negative shape all around it. So for instance, like right here, look at this very specific negative shape. Oops, on the other side. It's very specific negative shape. So if you start trying to draw that, it's a helpful way for your brain to break down shapes and to really get a little more accuracy when you draw from observation. That's what we're going to practice in our little worksheet. So you have this worksheet. Now you might have the printout, you might just have this posted into Canvas, either way. But what you're going to do is in your sketchbook or on the worksheet, if you have the actual worksheet, you're going to draw the scissor composition. And you're going to draw the negative shapes around it. So what that's going to look like is this. You're going to draw all the scissors as the positive shapes and then color in all the negative shapes, trying to really look closely at how those shapes are defined, how they move, how they curve, how they interact, and that's going to be your Flex Friday assignment.